Let's get started. So, I'm doing this video in part because of a piece I wrote today about the deification of Trump and the Epstein cult. Um, a lot of creators have taken to calling Epstein or like the people that are in the files the Epstein class, and I think that's right on point. It's starting to move beyond Trump with as widespread as it was. Trump may be, besides Epstein, the absolute worst person in those files, but he's by far not the only one. And as we're seeing now, this Epstein doesn't exist without the support of people that use his services and also enable the system to happen for whatever reason. But it was fascinating because I don't know. I've been on social media for so long. There's like little ebbs and flows that I can sometimes see. And I was on Facebook, and a lot of my friends were that I'm still friends with, that are Christians, all suddenly came out and were talking about, basically they were defending their vote for Trump. They were touting all the same talking points, right? They were touting the immigration issue and abortion and you name it, right? And they were defending their faith. And I found that really interesting. It's almost like, and that's kind of how people that are sort of ensconced in that right wing bubble, when because a lot of that right wing social media sphere is really pushed out by billionaires and the moneyed class, which are all absolutely in the Epstein files. And so I was, it struck me as like, wow, this is really interesting timing that a lot of people feel like they have to come out and defend this. And it got me to thinking about where the next step might be. Because as I was talking to a buddy of mine, we're saying, we don't see Trump on the golf course much anymore. His public appearances are becoming less and less. And we all know that there's questions about his health and his mental acuity. And it's pretty obvious he's not really making the decisions anymore, at least day to day. Like they're absolutely doing things to make him feel like he's still in charge. But it's pretty increasingly clear that Stephen Miller, Russell Voigt, the fascists are really the ones kind of pulling the strings and running the government. And so this actually got me to thinking about North Korea and how they run things in North Korea. And I know like a lot of people, when they try to compare this fascistic movement here to Hungary, which is an apt comparison as far as how they took power in Hungary and turned it from a democracy into an autocracy. Culturally, we have a lot more in common with this regime and MAGA and the Epstein cult uh, with North Korea, which is absolutely functions on a cult of personality, literally going back to a dead founder who they still is still the head of a government, right? Um, Christopher Hitchens referred to it as a necocracy, like a government run by the dead. Because the current leader of North Korea, he's just the head of the party. He's not the head of the government. That's like his either grandfather or great grandfather. That is um, still the titular head of the government. Now, that doesn't matter really so much in practical terms, but it does matter in cultural identity and in cultural terms. And that's what we're talking about, because one of the things that we miss for those of us who aren't in the Epstein cult, who aren't in MAGA, is we try to eschew or downplay the cultural war that we've been ensconced in for a very long time. And so I'm kind of explain what deification really is and why it's important to keep in mind for a cultural context. Because essentially what has happened is for the evangelical movement, at least for white folks, and for people that are in the Epstein cult or in the MAGA cult, they've replaced Jesus with Trump and their ideology, right? It's no longer about the ministry of Jesus and what he taught in the Bible. So, in order to do that, like, I want to break down, like, we're going to start back sort of in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And we're going to talk about shame culture versus sin culture, right? This is two, and what you're seeing right now are shame cultural notions. And that's how they keep things in MAGA in line. Not a sin culture, shame culture. So here's the biggest difference between shame culture and sin culture. A shame culture is outwardly and public facing. A sin culture means your spirituality is internal and individual. One, and that's important because the shame culture, everything is very much of the group. It's very much of, say, it's outward. So that's why you see a lot of showing of faith, like people posting on social media, or you see politicians praying. Like there's that famous photo of Trump and all the leaders are around him, putting their hands on him, and praying. That's a shame culture notion, right? Your faith in a shame culture it's not valid unless you show it to the world, unless you are shown publicly to be pious, to be religious, to be the most Christianest Christian that you can be. It doesn't do any good if you're just internally a good person. Now, keep in mind, that's exactly what Jesus told you to do, is be in a sin culture. That one of his phrases in the Bible was, or his teaching, or his commandments, or whatever you want to call it, one is, when two or more are gathered in my name, I'll be there. Right? That's him saying, you don't need a church. You don't need to be outwardly facing. You don't need to be a part of a group. You can be individually faithful and have a rich inner life and never tell anyone you're a Christian. But that's not the way it is with the Epstein cult, and that's not the way it is for MAGA. And I'll get to the reason as that. It's for two reasons. One, power and control. That's the second. It's power and control. That's why it is the way it is. Because with an outwardly, if everyone is constantly proselytizing and constantly putting their faith out there, it's a self reinforcing system that keeps everyone in line, right? Now, again, that works in the ancient world because you're talking about the polis, i.e., the people or the city, over an individual. Because in that world, gods are very real. If you say anger Poseidon, you might get a wave or an earthquake or a tsunami that comes and wipes your city off the map. You might have a bad harvest or something. So again, these are by someone not doing their duty and participating in a spiritual life in the polis outwardly, you're putting everybody at risk. And again, the way we think of religion is not the way they thought of religion, right? There's a famous Latin phrase, quid pro quo, like, I do something for you, you do something for me, that kind of thing. That's how they thought about religion. If you've watched the first season of Rome on HBO, when Titus Pullo is uh, he's in jail and he's getting ready to fight in the gladiatorial arena, and he grabs a cockroach and he crushes it and he offers it up to the gods, to the woman he loves to protect her. And You know, that's a sacrifice, right? And the reason that is important is because you have to give something to the gods in order to get something. It is very much transactional. Religio, where we get the term for religion from, is very transactional in that world. And that's exactly how those in power in religion today in America see it. It is transactional. That's what it is. So keep these. Reason I'm saying this, you need to keep these in mind because they're playing out, and what the GOP is trying to do to keep their base in line, right? Because I talk a lot about deification. Now, again, the way we think about it in the modern context, a deity is someone like Jesus Christ or Buddha or Muhammad. It's someone that's beyond existence or something that's beyond existence, and it's supposed to be about spiritual fulfillment. But for the ancient world, deification was not necessarily about that. Again, because we go to this shame cultural notions and we go to this quid pro quo kind of notions, deification of, say, Roman emperors or an individual is about aspirational notions. It's about something that you are meant to strive for. Because remember, they're gods, whether it's Ares, Mars, or Aphrodite, Hades, all that. They are personifications of either forces or things in human nature. That's what they are. That's how you need to think about Trump when he's the anointed one, right? I'll give you an example. Say on the left, if you're a Democrat, one of your, um, President Obama got me into organizing, into becoming a more active citizen politically. He inspired me, as he probably did for millions of Americans. And you look at him and you would say, yeah, he's an aspirational guy, right? He's charismatic, he's educated, he's well spoken, he's very intelligent, he's measured. Like, there's a lot of good qualities about former President Obama, right? But we don't deify him. But we do hold him up, or people hold him up as an example. For the Trump cult, and this is where we get into this mistake in understanding MAGA, they feel the same way about their anointed one as we do for Obama. They like Trump because he is aspirational to them. He's everything that they want to be. He's supposedly rich. He's crude. He's crass. He likes their same kind of tastes, eating McDonald's, and but even the darker urges and impulses. He treats women like crap. He's misogynistic. He's not intellectually curious. He's just, he has this false confidence that, weak people think is actual confidence. To them, he's aspirational. Now, they may hide it behind, oh, well, he supports the church and this and that. Sure. But here is where they're starting to run into problems. Here is where they're trying to hang on to their base, and that's the Epstein files, because it's very different to say be misogynistic and treat women like crap, or even sexually assault women, but it's like you can make excuses for that. There is no gray area when it comes to children. It's universally reviled across cultures and place and time. It is one of the most horrible things you can do. And that's what the Trump regime and the Epstein class are up against and trying to get us to accept. That's where they're at. And that's why they're at first they tried to whitewash it, and then they tried to hide it. And now they're stuck. That's why you're starting to see the rhetoric around Trump change. That's why you see, at first you saw on social media, it's like he's the defender of women, or they had him signing some, executive order protecting girls' sports. You're hearing about all the things that, it's like, no, we're protecting women. But that flies in the face of the murder of Renee Good. That flies in the face of all these women they didn't, these Epstein survivors that didn't get redacted from the Epstein files. So they're going to have to try to basically deify Jeffrey Epstein by either trying to move on from him, which they have, or, well, he liked him young, but he wasn't a sex trafficker. He may have had some oddities, but he wasn't a sex trafficker. And it's fine if you say to them, it will be fine for that cult if you say he likes them young, because again, you've got people like Matt Walsh out there saying, oh, well, 16 is peak fertility for women, so that's okay. They should be married off at 16. And if it's younger, then as long as it's biblical, that's fine. Because they did that back when. That's the argument they're going to make. Or you have a crazy dude like Nick Fuentes who's going to say, well, we should just round women up in camps, put them in concentration camps and then, like divvy them out according to whether, their fertility and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Again, that sounds insane, but it's how they view women. And that is where they want to go with it. It's why you're seeing a lot more religious overtones and that button being pushed over and over and over again. And you will keep seeing that as more and more stuff comes out about the Epstein files. Because that is their only card left to play. They have to deify Trump. And they're going to anyway, because if he's not long for this world, they got to keep it going. That's why you see all the imagery and propaganda of whenever he's really strong and really virile, or there's him walking with Jesus, or, you know, a- all this like he's standing up against evil, or he's, you know, leading us on to greater and greater things, and et cetera, et cetera. All of that is baked into deification because they're replacing Jesus with Trump. That is exactly what's happening. Doesn't because the idolatry part, which God commanded against in the Old Testament and the Ten Commandments, that doesn't matter. Because Trump is real, right? And he sells that those people, they get to keep their small-minded bigotries. They get to keep their horribleness without really changing anything. Because let's face it, feeding the poor is hard. Caring for the immigrant and the convict, which Jesus talks about, is hard. Having a rich, internal, spiritually fulfilling life and not worried about what the world thinks is hard. That's what Jesus bid his followers to do, his disciples to do. He didn't care about anything else. But again, you're not going to hear much about that. You are going to see him with Trump. You are going to see him in these pictures as they move forward. And yeah, Trump's going to screw it up like he did in the National Prayer Breakfast and basically slam Democrats and, but that's where we're at with this. And don't be surprised when after he's gone from this mortal coil that he is rebranded into a Christ-like figure where he's a martyr, that he tried to give He gave unto himself for the good of our country and us liberals and us progressives and us demons. Like, you know, well, boy, they just made it tough on him. Oh well, that we did everything we could because we're in league with Satan, and they're gonna and they're and but in order to do that, they're going to have to cast Jeffrey Epstein in a different role, and that is going to be the cultural tug of war that's coming. You're already kind of seeing it a little bit from all these crazy conspiracy theories that are getting dropped, most notably on the right wing. That Jay-Z was on Epstein Island in 1996, and that, Michael Jackson was, supposedly like the reason he had kids is he was trying to keep them from Jeffrey Epstein and all this other nonsense that's coming out. It's because what they want is if that sounds crazy, then it all must be crazy. And you don't know what's true. And so it's that sliver of doubt that they're going to try to run through to keep his base in line. And after he's gone, they're going to basically deify him. And it's going to be a necrotic cult, all but in name. That's it. And it sounds nuts. And it is kind of nuts. It actually is very nuts. But you have to understand that we are like, and this is why I write about things that I do and the topics I talk about is we're in a cultural fight. The politics of it, and this is where you have to think about politics. The politics of this is just downstream from culture. That's how they think about it. And they're right. That's why they're more effective with it than we are, because we don't want to engage in that cultural fight. Because we want politics to be, we want that to be civil. We want that to be a conversation, where two rational adults meet and discuss policy and debate it. That's not politics. It's never really been politics. These people, there is not going to come a moment where they're going to stop and say, "You got us." We were just waiting to get to, the 1,212th Epstein victim, and then you guys are right. We're going to give it up. No, that's not how this is going to work. They're gonna fight it to the bitter end because it's too psychologically damaging for their faithful to look in, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, to look inward and realize they've been taken, that their religion's been co-opted by the very people that Jesus railed against in the temple. That's why Trump has slipped into this anointed one role. Even though, like they haven't read Revelations and they're not going to look at him and go, wait a minute, isn't this the Antichrist? He's filling that role pretty, like, narratively. No. So that's sort of the background on why I wrote the piece that I wrote today, and what all that kind of means, you know, is we are going through this crisis because our institutions, culturally, politically, like in government, like, have been co-opted. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And we're in a fight. And a lot of this is going to occur on a cultural front. So it's best to kind of understand the context of what you're dealing with, right? It's like when you run into maybe Christians that are still in the MAGA cult, or, and they're making excuses about Epstein, or they're making, excuses for the Epstein class. That's why. Because this is wrapped up and religiosity for them. It's a cult, 100%. And that's how this cult functions. So, but yeah, I just want to jump on, do a little bit of a quick live, you know, and yeah, just kind of touch on some thoughts that kind of didn't really, like make it into the piece that kind of got left in the like that got left on the chop, you know. But yeah, um, got some awesome stuff coming up this week. I've got more lives. I'm talking to Arturo Dominguez on Wednesday. Your weirdo friend, Ellie Leonard tomorrow. So I'll be talking to Ellie Leonard on another live. And also Larissa Reinhardt and maybe a couple others. My God, that's like six. Gonna be few. So yeah. But yeah. Don't let this crazy stuff get you down. You know, like a lot of times when I'm talking, like, just want to give you context about, where we're at and why we're here. You know, and the reason this is coming out, um, is I must have been on a live. I can't remember if it was on a live or if it was in a conversation I was having with a friend. Is that right before, um, yeah, it might have been Carolyn. Right before something is about to end, it reveals itself, right? And that's what you're saying. The Epstein class has absolutely revealed itself. And now they have no choice but to ask Americans and the world to accept this, to accept pedophilia, to accept child rape, to accept all kinds of horrible stuff. In the same way, the billionaires are asking us to accept that they get to have all the wealth and resources and power, and we get to be made to feel bad about having rotisserie chicken and health drinks. And if that's not the kind of world you want to live in, or you don't want your kids or your neighbors or your community to live in, stand against it in any way you can, even if it's just doing lives and talking about it, or talking to your friends, or getting people to be informed or engaged. That's it. Even posting on your social media and saying, no, this isn't cool. All of it matters, every bit of it, because we're in a cultural fight, and trying to change culture is very hard, but it's possible, and it's not as daunting as you think. And if the Epstein class wasn't so scared, they wouldn't be pushing so hard. So, anyway, that's all I got for you. Keep the faith, defend democracy. I'll see you later.